Hello there.
Welcome, everybody.
We are. Hi, Beth, and hi, Chris.
Jim, Crystal. Hey, everybody.
We can see you in the small window. Yeah, we're not hiding from you. We're here. So just we'll get started in just a moment, but just kind of want to let people in, let you guys have a chance to say hi to each other.
Welcome to our Soulmate process webinar, where we will talk to you about how we prepared ourselves to find love, lasting love, and the lessons that we're hoping we can pass on to you.
Absolutely. And this is the first time we've taught this material this way. And we are extremely excited.
It's a little personal.
It's a little personal.
Yeah.
We're gonna get very personal.
I'm a little shy about the personal nature of it, but I think it's worth it to help spread the message. Forgive my congestion. I have a little bit of a cold, so hopefully that won't be too much of a problem.
She has a cold. When she has a cold, I can't get as close to my baby as I ordinarily would want to.
I've been doing a lot of touring with a documentary on Shudder called Horror Noir. I was an executive producer on, and
why don't you just go ahead and introduce yourself?
Well,
as long as we're opening that up.
My name is Tanana Reeve. I am an author and an educator. I teach at UCLA. I teach in the MFA Creative Writing Program at Antioch University, Los Angeles. And I am madly in love with my husband of 20 years. That's my biggest qualification for this webinar.
But the big qualification for actually being able to, there's one thing to live a life and to find love. It's another thing you actually were nationally known for helping people in their relationships.
I had a dating column that was syndicated through Knight Ridder back in the day for the Miami Herald. And yeah, I'll talk about that as part of my preparation for finding my soulmate, because it was kind of a trick I was playing on myself by writing that dating column. I could write about issues that were coming up in my own love life and then help resolve them.
Yes, actually, we're going to do a little something. We're experimenting around with this technology. So we're going to go over to boom. All right.
Great.
And if we do that, then we can go to, let's see, there's the Who is Tanana Reeve Do?
Oh, well, that's way ahead.
That's way ahead?
Yeah,
okay, so let's go to this one. So I think that the first thing we want to do is kind of define what a soulmate is.
Sure, absolutely. And we're not talking about sort of like a mystical soulmate, like you're only born to find one other person on the planet, and if you don't find that person, you'll never have love. That's not what we mean, or certainly not what I mean when we talk about soulmates. Really, you could have had a soulmate and lost a soulmate, perhaps to an early death or some other circumstance. So we really believe that there's no such thing as only one person for you out there, but this course is designed to help you find one person who can be your soulmate.
Now, the way I've defined a soulmate is a person who, when you meet them, you can feel the door to your future opening. That your values, your dreams, your hopes, the direction that you're moving in, all of those things are congruent. And you can feel that this is possible. And I totally agree with what Tanana said. It's not as rare as you might think. That I've spoken to dozens and dozens of people who've been married for over 20 years. And the thing that was so fascinating about it, one of the things that was fascinating about it, was the fact that most of them hadn't dated more than 5 to 10 people before they found each other. The implications of that are fascinating. If it suggests that if you don't have to date more than 5 to 10 people, let's say it's 10 people, in order to find someone who you can really be with, then the question becomes one of, well, how likely is it to find that person? I suspect that most people have within their immediate circle at least 100 people, and that each of those people has at least 100 people. And I'm going to suggest to you that you are no more than, playing the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. I don't think that you're more than 3 degrees away from someone with whom you can actually share your life. It's not that unlikely, but you have to set yourself up properly. Now, we'll go more into who it is that I am, but I wanted to start with that sense of what it is that I honestly and deeply believe to be true about the situation.
Actually, who are you, though?
Who am I? Okay, we've got those intro cards. Let's go to the intro cards. I'm going to go to an intro card just because it's there. And okay, so Well, that's my path to love. Wait a minute. I'm not going to do that.
That's
We're
what
going to
I
stay
was
with.
saying.
I'm sorry. Okay. So my name is Stephen Barnes. I'm going to actually just kind of let you see my face again. Okay. My name is Stephen Barnes. And for the last, I don't know, 6 or 7 years, I've been a life coach, more or less professionally. But before then, I'd counseled hundreds and hundreds of people on different aspects of life. And the three most important areas were always your career, artistic expression for me, because I was a writer, the physical aspect, and relationships. And to that end, I'm a New York Times and Essence Award, best-selling writer, and won the NAACP Image Award, and won, Hugo and Nebula, and this and that. And that's all well and good and fun. I've also have a strong martial arts background, with black belts in multiple subjects. But none of those things are as important as the love in my life. None of those things are more important, especially than my family, my wife, my children. Just that process, being a part of that process of sustaining the human race. That one of the things that is important there is the bond with another human being. Even, you might not want to have children. You might be beyond the age for children. You might be gay. It doesn't matter. The core wiring that says find a human being and bond to that human being is so powerful and can be so confusing. It can be so painful. The process of doing this can be very confrontational. So what I wanted to do was to take everything that I'd learned, everything that I taught my students, and there were some very specific experiences that opened my mind to the possibility that we have more control over something that seems to be random, seems to be, it'll happen if you're blessed by the gods. I don't think it's that. I think that it's much more direct than that. And I think that it's possible to look at this process in a way that makes it not just replicable, but vastly increases the amount of the power that is in your hands, what you can do. And we're going to be going over the steps that will allow you to test this for yourself, over the next hour.
I mean, there are ways you might listen to our soulmate story and say, well, that's not going to happen to me because I'm not going to be here. I'm not going to be there. I'm not going to be doing X, Y, or Z. But actually, the reason we decided to start teaching this is because we found out that we had both undertaken a very similar process before we ever met. And anybody can undertake that process. It doesn't matter if you're a writer, not a writer, going to write. We met at a writer's conference. That doesn't mean you have to meet at a writer's conference. That's just what happened. But before we got to that writer's conference, we had both made the decision that we were ready for lasting love. We'd been willing to make changes in our lives to create room for that lasting love. And we went through very specific steps that were somewhat similar, not identical, but similar enough that it really made us think, you know what, let's share this process with other people to help them find lasting love.
And what I thought was when Genevieve told me the steps that she went through before we met, and I looked at the steps that I had gone through, and then I listened to what people who had lasting relationships. In other words, I didn't pay attention to people who were just married or just in love. It was the question of a successful relationship, in my mind, was one that lasts long enough to have raised a kid. 15, 20 years. The question of what did those people do? Once again, whether or not they had kids, that wasn't important. The important thing is to be an adult and in an adult relationship where those kids would have been safe. I think that the human pair bond instinct, the biological part of love, is about creating a bond that is so powerful that the stresses of life will not tear you apart. So that requires a lot of compatibility. It requires honesty. It requires commitment. It requires, you're not looking for the exit hatch. You're not looking where's the door?
You're not always looking over your shoulder for the next prospect.
Yeah, because there's always a bigger, better deal. There's always somebody who's going to look better on the surface of something because of the fact that you're dealing with someone the way they look when they wake up in the morning. Whereas that person that you're kind of going gaga over, that person, might have spent 3 hours getting their makeup exactly right. And so the average of what you're seeing there can be through the roof.
The work husband, the work wife, you know what I'm talking about.
Well, no, what are you talking about?
No, but I work at home, honey.
except when you're at UCLA,
Oh, that's
are
true.
on the road.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about that. But in any case, yeah, we're so happy all of you were here. And why don't we go to the card where we're introducing what soulmates are and walk through some of those concepts, that first card right there.
Yes, we will do that.
Walk through some of the concepts that we want to pass on to you. What is a soulmate? So we're talking about lasting love, and we're talking about lasting love no matter what love feels like to you between two adults. Male, female, non-binary, gay, straight.
Yeah. Now we're talking about, a couple. And just earlier today, somebody was talking about polygamous relationships. All I want to say about that is that each additional person that you add is a little bit like adding another ball that you're juggling. At the very least, you're talking about greater levels of complexity. So let's start with kindergarten, love 101. If you master that, then go ahead and do whatever it is you want to do. But we want to give you the possibility to create a relationship with one person that can last a lifetime. If you chose to go on above that, your business.
Not my area of expertise.
Not my area of expertise either. I've seen it.
But I do strongly believe that the principles that we teach in this would be helpful in any long-lasting relationship.
And as far as I can see, gay relationships aren't any different. That the basic rules are the basic rules. And they're not really rules, they're principles. What we're going to do is I'm going to share very honestly the way I see the situation, the way my students have seen the situation and have reported to me, and the way people who have had relationships for decades have reported to me. And then Tananarive will discuss the way she sees things. And we will not always agree completely.
Nope.
Because that's the truth of relationships. We don't have to.
No,
we don't have to. So go ahead.
So we're looking for, this is an important part, non-toxic matches. I know that when I was in my 20s and I was still searching for my soulmate, the more toxic, mysterious, come here, go away kind of vibe I was getting in a relationship, the more intense my feelings grew. That intensity of emotions that seems like love is sometimes just toxicity. And part of finding your soulmate is learning to tell the difference between actually falling in love and chasing after someone who punches your buttons just right, who punches your insecurity buttons, who punches your buttons that say you're not good enough. That can feel like love, but love isn't supposed to hurt. That's the most important thing. I mean, that's not to say that you don't have arguments sometimes and there is an anger in a relationship sometimes. But I know when I was in my 20s, unless it hurt a little bit, it didn't feel real.
Especially if you've been hurt by someone you love, or if you grew up in a dysfunctional home,
right?
Or if you grew up without a role model of what a healthy relationship is, then you might have gained really the wrong image of what it is. You might be like, what is relationship? Is it possible to find love? Is it possible to have a soulmate, a connection on that level? And if you fill it with images from the media, it cannot just be toxic. It can be so unrealistic that has nothing to do with what an actual sustainable day by day, what is that thing? So what we want to do is to give you a set of tools that will enable you to go through the process that we have agreed upon, that we believe maximizes your chance to develop this thing called love in a lasting way.
And there's a checklist you can give yourself in a new relationship. Is this love built on mutual respect? It has to be mutual respect, admiration, kindness. If any of those basic factors are missing from the very beginning, that's a very good sign that this is not going to be a lasting relationship, or if it is, it's not going to be built from a healthy origin.
So tell us a little bit about how our meeting looked from your point of view. What was your story? How did you get to that point?
Well, the first thing I want to do is show this slide. This is us at Clark Atlanta University. You see me over in the corner and Steve on the other corner. Between us, Jewel Gomez is standing. The late, great Octavia E. Butler is sitting. And next to me is Samuel R. Delaney. So who can guess what kind of writers conference this was? It was a Black science fiction. It was a speculative fiction conference. So it was called the African American Fantastic Imagination Explorations in Science Fiction, Fantasy, and Horror. It was my first such conference. It was actually pretty much the first such conference, but I had just published my first novel, The Between, And I was invited on the basis of that. Steve, of course, had published many, many books before that, but I was brand new to the field. So I was just excited to be there. Little did I know that not only was I like having the thrill of a lifetime meeting this woman, Octavia Butler, and meeting these other great artists, but I was about to meet my husband to be.
It's good story. Okay, so we'll take that much.
Yeah, and
I'd
heard about Steve first. Let me give a little more background too. I'd heard about him from a friend of mine named Michael Morano, who's also a writer. And he gave me some information that was not accurate about Steve, but some that was. And he was intriguing. And at the time, I wasn't consciously looking for a soulmate. I had just heard that Steve was a television writer. He'd written for The Outer Limits on Showtime, The New Twilight Zone. I wanted to learn about television writing. So I was like, oh, great. Then I'll meet this guy. Michael was just trying to set us up, and I'm like, I don't know him. And some of the things he was saying did not make it sound like we were going to be a good match. I won't get into them all. But I was like, yeah, I don't know about all that. But I do want to learn about television writing. Maybe he's a nice guy. I can't wait to meet him. And I happened to be in a hotel room with my mom shortly before this conference, and I saw part of an Outer Limits episode starring Amanda Plummer as a scientist who had invented a time machine so she could go back in time and kill serial killers before they could strike. I had
a brilliant idea.
I know, right? I had missed the beginning. But I told my friend Michael, oh, wow, you said that Stephen Barnes writes for this show? Because I just saw an episode and that show is great. I really want to meet him now. And he said, Stephen Barnes wrote that episode. I was like, what? So that was like his calling card, was like he had this amazing television episode and I couldn't wait to meet him.
And we're going to take apart what was said there later on, but it is germane to our discussion. For my own part, my first marriage had fallen apart. I was living in Vancouver, Washington, in one apartment while my ex-wife and my daughter lived on the other side of this duplex, and I was. We'll go into this more deeply because I want to share every aspect of this. But I was convinced that somehow I had missed the boat. There was something that was going very wrong in my life, and the process of fixing those things taught me a lot of very specific pieces of the puzzle. But being about to attend the African American Fantastic Imagination Conference, I was told by a friend of mine, I think was it Ken? I think so. A friend of mine named Ken, that there was a lady named Tananarive Due.
Are you serious?
I'm pretty sure that was writing and was, wondered whether or not I knew her.
Okay.
And so I saw, I took a look at one of the novel. I guess it was The Between. It had a picture on it. I thought that you were like 6.5 feet tall. It was just. Let me actually put that picture up there.
That's not the picture.
Are you sure it's not the picture?
I know it's a different picture.
Oh, okay. Well, never mind. And so it was like, okay, and so I wasn't really thinking much about that, but I went to this conference. And the interesting thing about the conference, and once again, I want to talk about the moment at which I recognized it, which everything kind of clicked in, because I had met her the first day of the conference, and I treated her like a little sister as much as I could. I thought
when you say you met me, it's because I was literally in the room next to yours. I could hear your every movement. So when you were ready to leave that morning, I stumbled out of my room and said, "Hey, I'm Tananarive. Want to have breakfast?" So that's how you met. That's how you met me.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
She stalked me.
I did stalk you a little bit,
and I was trying to be very, very nice to her because it's a very small community.
Very small, and
I wanted to. I was prepared to nurture her. I took a look at her initial work and The Between, and it was The Between. And I thought that the quality of the work was very, very high. And I literally thought, well, wow, at creating a mimetic universe of, that looks like the world around us. She was already better than I was at that. And she was just getting started. So I thought, wow, well, let me do what I can to help her. So I kept a little bit of a distance. I was trying to be very, very polite, but there was a moment that came. It was the night before we were supposed to leave the conference that everything broke open.
It was, I remember it as sort of a slow unfolding. I mean, I have to say, as a dating columnist, I had written a column about love at first sight. Mm-hmm. And I didn't really believe in it. I mean, I talked to people who believed that they had had similar experiences. I was a skeptic. I didn't think it was possible to feel anything remotely like love for someone you had just met, or in our case, over a long weekend. I think it was like a 3-day conference. So why were we holding hands at the Atlanta airport, vowing we could build an empire together at the end of that weekend? It started, for me, I mean, we had a fine breakfast, and that was polite. But for me, that first moment of like, wait a minute, was watching you speak. It was almost like you had this aura around you. And well, if you've heard Steve speak, you know what I mean. He has his heart on his sleeve. He leaves it all there on the stage for people who are listening to him. And he's just this open-hearted, super intelligent, funny guy. And I was like, oh, okay, wait a second. I like this guy.
Now, for me, I knew she was brilliant because I'd taken a look at her writing. You know, I thought I kind of registered cute, but nothing more than that, really. The first night we went out eating, and there was some live music, and we were doing some line dancing. And I did kind of notice that she moved like a healthy animal.
I like dancing.
Yeah, you know, and I thought to myself, nice. So so intellect is there, the physicality is there, and I watched the way she was interacting with people, and there was so much kindness, so much love there that on an emotional level, I was getting a feeling this is a nice person. But there was a very
I had him fooled. No, and also during that evening, which I remember very well, it was like one of these magic moments. Sweet Honey and the Rock, the vocal group was sitting in the back. Johnny Cochran was strolling by. It was like like a compilation of like Today in Black America, you know, because Octavia Butler was there, and she and Chip Delaney were kind of giggling about the way that we were sparking off of each other. Was it that night?
I don't know. I don't know when they started giggling.
I think it was that night. Because he's told us about that.
Because my attitude was I was not consciously aware that there was anything going on.
Sometimes other people can see it.
It's true. It's true.
Yeah.
So, but I know the very specific moment at which I did know that there was something going on. And it was when you went up to talk about how you got Stephen King to give you a cover blurb on My Soul to Keep. Now, you know, Tananarive had done the dating column for the Miami Herald.
Yeah.
And Dave Barry
works for the Miami Herald.
Works for the Miami Herald, and he was in a rock band with Stephen King, the Rock Bottom Remainders.
Right.
They're terrible and wonderful, and they have so much fun traveling around to book fairs doing concerts, right? And Tananarive, you talked to Dave Barry and Barry's wife.
I saw Dave Barry in the cafeteria.
Okay.
And I was sort of gushing about the band, and they were about to play at the Miami Book Fair. And I was like, wow, you know, wouldn't it be great to be in like sort of the training league for the Rock Bottom Remainders? And he said, well, Mitch Albom is going to be doing vocals during the Elvis number. So do you know how to play Jailhouse Rock? And the answer is yes, I do, even if you don't. I had to run out and get a songbook, but that's neither here nor there. I was like, yeah, I'll do it. So he invited me to actually come on stage and play keyboards. And I met Stephen King that way. I signed him a copy of my book. That's a Good Trick, writers. If you want to give a writer a copy of your book, autograph it for them personally. And he was perfectly happy to take it, and he did. And when it was ready, a time for My Soul to Keep come out, I wrote and asked for a blurb. And he said he had read The Between, and he enjoyed it, and he'd be happy to blurb My Soul to Keep.
Now, here's the whole thing. I sat in the audience listening to her, and I thought to myself, she did a 3-wall bank shot on that guy. She used the position at the Miami Herald. She used the knowing how to play keyboards, you know, this skill over here. She used the fact that she was going to look great on stage in her leather miniskirt.
Hey, it's not my fault they were dressed in leather miniskirts.
And I know that she caught Stephen King's attention. Now they're friends. Now she's taken it outside the realm of fan or professional. They're in a heart space connection. So she used this position.
I would say like rock buddies.
Not
so much friends.
Okay. She used this position to get to this position, to this position. And I thought to myself, she's really smart. And this is the truth. Every time I tell this story, the same thing happens to me. Because as soon as I said, she's really smart, my next thought was, and she's really cute too. It's almost as if I had not given myself permission to notice until I realized that everything was aligned. I wasn't going to react to somebody just because they were physically attractive. I had to have a sense of, this person, we're on each other's wavelength. At that moment, I felt this chill go up my spine, and I thought, oh God, Steve, you're in trouble. I'd never felt anything like that. At one point,
we were in an event, and I showed you a little shoulder.
So,
and what did you do?
What did I do?
Yeah,
I realized that we were going to be leaving the next day, and that I did not want to leave there without making some kind of a real connection. I had to make a genuine connection. How do I do that? So I looked around the room, and sitting next to me, 2 seats away from me, was a woman with a baby on her lap. And I leaned over to her. Now, remember, I'd been a mucky muck at this thing, so everybody knew who I was. I leaned over to this woman and said, "May I borrow your baby?"
What kind of mother is this?
And she looked at me. It's like, excuse me. I just said, I really love children, and I just like to, I don't want to leave the room. Just, may I just kind of play with your baby for a minute? And she said, okay. And so I took the baby, and Tananari was down off the stage signing autographs and talking to a crowd. I got down on the floor and started
the floor with the baby.
It started playing with the baby.
You think I noticed that? I totally noticed that. I was like, oh my God. He's playing on the floor with the baby.
It was, if I had not been sincere, it would have been one of the dirtiest tricks imaginable.
But you had an 11-year-old daughter already.
That's right.
And he was basically broadcasting, he is ready and open in terms of children.
That's right. Yeah. So in other words, there was a gut-to-gut communication, hindbrain to hindbrain communication going on there. And it was instinctive. It was one of the smartest things I've ever done. And like I said, had I been insincere, it would have been some kind of nasty pickup trick. But I was deadly serious.
He was serious because he had an 18-year-old when our son was born. So he could have been done. But no, he chose to start over again.
I love kids. I love kids. So it's like,
and we went dancing.
Yes,
but we didn't have a slow dance because one of the organizers' daughters had a little crush on it.
No, we did have a slow dance.
One slow dance.
We got one slow dance at the very end.
Okay.
Yes, the organizer's daughter had a crush on me, so I was trying to be nice about that.
Yeah.
But ultimately, we had our first goodnight kiss.
And then at the airport, we were holding hands like a couple of kids going home from summer camp, staring into each other's eyes. I lived in Miami.
And I lived in Washington State, so we could not have gotten further apart in the continental United States.
I mean, we were as far can be, right? We were like, we could build an empire. I don't know why we were saying the word empire, but that was how we just saw. It's like, oh my gosh, we could have a future together. We could really not just have a future together, but we could create something.
Well, but don't you see that's part of what when I talk about a soulmate, someone who you can see your future together with them, that was saying you have ambitions. I will not hold you back from your ambitions. We could build something together. I would not try to clip your wings. I'm always, one of the jokes, things that I often say is, fly high, little bird. Do what you're going to do. Be who it is that you are. I'm not here to inhibit you. And there are times when, you're tired or you're jealous or you're angry. And you have to remember, what are the core commitments that the two of you have together? Because you're not looking for an exit.
Right. Absolutely not. And this is probably the part where some of you are like, well, that's not my life. That's not going to happen to me. I'm not going to writers' conferences and I'm not going to meet Octavia Butler and all that. It's not really about any of that. It's not about where we were, the exact circumstances of our meeting. What's hidden underneath that story is the separate steps we had taken before we ever met each other so that we would be ready for love. Because I can tell you, had I not taken those steps, there was a way Steve was looking at me when I showed up my shoulder. I would have been terrified. I would have backed away. Even worse, I would have said, oh my God, what's wrong with him? Because I wouldn't have been ready. I wouldn't have been ready, but I had gotten myself ready so that when he met me with that sincerity in his eyes, I could receive it, not be afraid of it, and actually walk toward it. Believe me, that was a big step for me. That was not the way I had operated as a single person. Remember what I said. It was that emotionally unavailable type who was the most attractive to me. Steve was the opposite of emotionally unavailable. He was broadcasting availability in waves, as was I, right?
But also understand that I was not broadcasting it randomly.
Right.
I was not broadcasting it to everyone. I was broadcasting it to someone who was an appropriate potential partner.
Right. So is this where we talk about the steps?
Yeah, let's talk about the steps. And because what I want to do is everything we're going to be talking about over the next weeks is going to be related to just a few basic pieces of the puzzle. And let's go to the steps now.
Well, how about our individual stories?
Okay. Well, individual. So we just kind of did our individual stories.
No, we haven't talked about how we prepared. Oh yeah.
Yes, we did
these steps. Right. Okay. So here was my path to preparing myself to meet Steve. Steve mentioned I had been writing a dating column for the Miami Herald. I think I wrote it for about 4 years, maybe 2 to 4 years. I'm not sure how long. It was published in the Miami Herald through Knight Ridder Publishing, and it appeared in newspapers around the country. And even like recently, I've had someone tell me that something I wrote in that column helped them find their love in their life. So it was dating people at work. Is there any such thing as love at first sight? You know, topic by topic by topic, I would talk to, usually it stemmed from a personal experience I'd had, usually that had gone wrong. I would find other people who'd been in that situation where it had gone wrong and sometimes right. And I would always talk to a therapist or a relationships expert at the end about how we screwed it up. So it was like every couple weeks, this was what I was doing. I was chronicling my dating life, talking to other people in the same boat, which is almost like having a support group, and then reaching out to a therapist to get advice over and over and over again. So there was that, the dating column. Secondly, real therapy. I know therapy is expensive, which is one of the biggest issues with therapy. A lot of you may have insurance that covers therapy. Sometimes insurance doesn't cover therapy, and therapy can cost $90 and up a session, $150 a session. It is not cheap, but I highly, highly, highly recommend it. I really wish everyone in the country sort of had mandatory therapy by the time they reach adulthood, because even if you've had a relatively gentle life, there's always a little bit of trauma that's worked its way in there. In my case, I would say the biggest thing I was working on was that although my father was in the home and he was always there for us and he was a great provider and he was kind, he also from childhood had developed a habit of being kind of off by himself, which as a writer, I can understand. But I have this image of like the closed door. I went to visit my grandmother once, his mother, and I didn't know her very well. And it was over Thanksgiving break. So the first thing I did was I closed myself up in the room and she said, "Oh, just like your father."
Oh.
Right? So that was not my imagination. That had been something that had been a personality trait. He would disappear into his writing, and he's writing about philosophy and race and law. And that's I don't have any memories of him missing a school event where he disappointed me. In fact, when the therapist tried to tell me that that was the issue I was dealing with, I didn't believe it. Pardon me. I really didn't see it until one day I was visiting my sister in Italy. My sister Janita spent a year in Italy after law school, and she was living with an Italian family, and she'd asked me to bring a Barbie doll with me. But I had left this Barbie doll out in the sun, and it was a Barbie doll whose eyes would open and close. But because I had left the doll out in the sun, the eyes were stuck closed. Isn't this like, I'm not making this up. This feels like a metaphor. I swear to you, the doll was asleep, okay, and would not wake up. So while we're sitting at dinner and everyone's speaking Italian but me, I noticed this girl huddled next to her father with a bowl of water as he was dabbing gently to try to open the doll's eyes. And I, all of a sudden, was so overcome with emotion that I had to get up and leave the table. I was crying. It was like that moment with Judd Hirsch in
Ordinary People.
Ordinary People, like where he finally gets what the therapist is saying. Oh my gosh, that's not a memory I have from my father, right? That and it crashed over me, and God bless my father, he's still living, I'm lucky to have him.
Yeah.
Your
Wonderful, man.
stories will be different. Your stories will be different, but that was mine. So that, hello, emotionally unavailable. So someone who pricked that emotionally unavailable button was drawing on a deep wellspring of attraction, going all the way back to childhood that felt like love. It was an unfulfilled yearning to be that little girl with her dad dabbing the doll's eyes, right? And I was looking for that in relationships. I would not have seen that without therapy. I would not have seen it. So, like I said, everyone's story will be different. And it's sometimes those little things, it's these little, you stray off the path just a little bit and find yourself way off course in the woods where you don't want to be. And that's kind of where I was. I wasn't mad at my father. It was just like, oh, okay. And there's probably other stuff in there too. But to me, that was a major piece. It's very typical with the opposite gender parent that a lot of those issues are coming from there. The next thing was the toxic patterns. Okay, so unfortunately with therapy, recognizing your pattern is not the same as dissolving it. If only you could just flip a switch and not be attracted to emotionally unavailable people anymore. I had to figure that out. I had to really work on that. That was, in fact, one of the most frustrating parts of my awakening, was that I felt like I understood it and I still couldn't overcome it for a while. And I was still making bad decisions and bad sexual decisions, which leads me to my next point. This may not work for everybody. Bear with me. Celibacy. Some of you are thinking, well, that's easy. But in my case, I was in my 20s and my early 30s. I had sexual partners, and often it was sex too soon, sex with the wrong person, sex in the wrong circumstances. None of these sexual relationships were turning into the true love that I wanted. So I realized, you know what? I am not making the best decisions here. Let me take sex off the table. Like if I'm dating somebody and the sex comes up, as it often will, I'd be like, oh, I don't know you well enough for that yet. I just explain my situation. And believe me, it cuts through pretty quickly those people who are not interested in a serious relationship. Some of you are thinking that wouldn't work for you. Is it weird as an adult, after the what?
It's not a core part of the process that we're going to be offering you.
Right.
But it is going to be something that is congruent between her experience and mine.
Right.
So we want to be honest with you, but we're not going to be dogmatic.
I was celibate probably for a year, maybe even more than a year. And right before I met Steve, I had one of those situations where I was dating a guy. We went out, we did all the traditional stuff. He was pushing for more, and I was like, oh no, but and it was hard. It's not easy. It's not that I didn't want to. It's that I had made a decision that I wasn't going to have sex again until I was in love with someone who was in love with me. That's a high bar. In love with someone who was in love with me. He was not that guy. So the next time I called him, he was like, or we went out, he said, maybe we need to see other people, right? I get it. He was looking for something more casual. Well, guess what? I had saved myself so much time by not dating somebody who was only interested in a casual relationship. I met Steve, I'm not even kidding, a week later. A week later.
All right. So, we haven't planned out, scripted everything that's going on here, but this is perfect.
Okay.
It's perfect what you just said. I wasn't sure you were going to go there. Because this is the first time we've taught this like this. We're going to be surprising each other just a little bit. I went through my breakup with my first wife, ended up in a situation where I had a chance to date a woman who I thought was the woman of my dreams, and completely blew the relationship. Just completely blew. Everything I did was wrong. Everything I did pushed her further away. It was just awful. I had no idea. So I had to go through a series of stages where I was very insecure. I felt like I didn't know what was going on. It forced me to realize some things that I will be sharing with you over the coming weeks. But the most important thing is that in the process of this, I learned basically how to become more attractive than I'd ever been in my entire life. It was like I simply couldn't do wrong in terms of women. I was getting that reaction that all guys wish they had. I certainly had wished I had, where it's like, it seemed like any woman that I wanted, I could have. And this is a bizarre thing. I want to
Poor
say,
baby.
well,
Just
there's a
kidding,
trick to
just
this.
kidding.
I'm gonna, some of this is I'm gonna give away out of order. There is an easy step to sleeping with anybody that you want, and that step is this: don't want to sleep with anyone who you can't have, who is not interested in you. You have some control over turning that desire thing on and off. Why are you turning it on with inappropriate people? So I mean, it's a little bit like, why are you hailing cat taxis that don't have the light on? Why are you, why are you knocking on doors where they very clearly tell you, sorry, we're not interested? If you are a healthy human being, there are going to be enough people who are interested in the kind of human being you are. And I had to move past my sense of doubt, my sense of deprivation, my sense of questioning myself. So it was so odd that all I had to do is get in touch with a core instinct thing. And all of a sudden, that sense of lack was gone. And the day that I went to that conference, I had really hit this frequency. And I was, that 24-hour period, beyond the shadow of a doubt, whatever that thing was where I was attractive, it expanded. It was like everybody I was meeting was interested in me. It was the strangest thing. I'd never come across it before. And that night, when I went to my room, I remember I was so confused. I was so clear in one sense and so confused in another. And I will be sharing with you specifics about what it was that I did that created this effect. But I have to lay some foundation work first. But I dropped to my knees in my room and I started praying. And I said, God, I understand this game now. I see what this thing is, this male-female sex thing is. And I see how I could be the dog of all time if I wanted to. And I don't want this. What I want is a partner. I want someone to love and cherish. I want someone I can really be myself with.
Right.
And I thought, and if I have to wait the rest of my life to find her, that is what I am prepared to do. And the next morning,
I came charging out of my room, stalking you.
So
I'm surprised I didn't hear that prayer. I practically had my ear.
You obviously felt it.
Hello.
You obviously
Hello,
felt
neighbor.
it. There was something going on that had to do with the total confidence that you can walk the world by yourself if necessary. And you love yourself and you have respect for yourself and you're not feeling any sense of desperation at all. This is who I am and this is where I am.
Yes.
And I am willing to take that physical connection, that thing that can conceivably bring life into the world, that triggers the pair bond instinct on a deep, deep level. I'm willing to take that as seriously as I should. This is not saying that sex isn't also fun. I'm having a lot of fun in that arena of my life. Make no mistake.
If you're not looking for that soulmate relationship, as long as you're safe and consensual and with your own, morality structure, then hey,
have fun, party time
out there. But I knew that was not working for me.
Right.
That was not interesting for me. It didn't feel healthy for me. And I had been there and done that.
Why in the world should you ask less from life than you really desire? Why? Especially if you have some sense that you're cutting pieces of yourself off and passing them out to strangers.
Yeah.
Like party favors. It's like, I think the point where you want a connection in life partner is different from the point where, as the song goes, you've got a brand new pair of roller skates and he's got a brand new key. It's like, let's get together and see what this is about. But then there's another point where, been there, done that.
Yeah.
I'm ready for the next level.
And I wasn't willing to play games. This is another important thing. During this era, as the dating columnist, I saw a lot of books. There was one called The Rules. Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. All these books had tips and tricks to meet your mate. And the advice was specifically wrong. The authors of The Rules are divorced. I remember Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. I think that was the title.
Yes,
They
yes.
specifically talked about how if you want to find that partner, you've got to basically give them some, kind of thing, which was the complete opposite
Well, look,
of what worked for me.
Those books for women are equivalent to the pickup artist books for men.
Right.
And the pickup artist books are filled with what I consider to be tricks to act as if you are a healthy human being. If you are a healthy animal, you're going to give off this body language, you're going to say this, you're going to do this, you're going to do this. All that stuff feeds into this idea that men and women cannot communicate.
Yes,
with each
it's
other.
Gamesmanship and trickery and, pretending you're less interested than you are.
Yes.
You only answer every second phone message. I don't know. There were these really ridiculous rules.
Serve him milk in his food because it will remind him of mother's milk. Literally, I saw that in a book, How to Make a Man Fall in Love with You.
Wow. Okay, so there's a lot of bad information out there. Maybe sometimes it works by accident because when people meet, there's all kinds of potential for things to go right, even if some of the advice you have is wrong. But the industry built around relationships, to me, was full of just crap, just complete BS, ineffective, dishonest, childish.
And it implies that men do not want love and women do not want sex. And this is a lie. It is a lie. One of the things that I want to do here is to start from the position that men and women are equal and complementary, that we are each other's brothers and sisters and mothers and daughters, and that we can connect honestly with each other and don't have to play these games. And what I want to do, as women are largely renegotiating the social contract and men are often feeling like they don't know what is going on, the men's rights advocates, the incels, strike me as young men who are seeing the game change but have no idea what the rules are. They're rats running in a maze where the cheese is long gone, and they're just frustrated. So if you go on this journey with us for the next few weeks, we want you to start with the assumption that men and women are that equal and complementary thing, that we're two halves of a whole, that we love each other. And the question of can you trust? One of my best teachers said, don't trust people. Instead, rely on them to do what is they believe to be in their own best interest. It's up to you to determine what that is. So the question is, my path to love, we've talked about it. I listed some things there that are principles that we're going to be going over. Next week, we'll share the specific soulmate process, the process of indirect attention, which was the secret to opening up that, finding women that were attracted to me.
What do you mean when you say indirect attention?
It means that, remember you said that if you had not been ready psychologically, my focus on you, the way I was coming at you, would have scared you.
Right.
Okay. So you have to have that intensity, but you can't hit somebody with it all at one time, or you'll blow them out of the water. You'll come across like a predator. You'll come across like someone who can't be trusted. It's like the game, as it is, with integrity, requires a gradual unfoldment. Let's get to know each other. If I outpace you too far, if I'm putting too much on the table, I'm opening up my heart too far, you'd be right to wonder what was wrong with me.
Okay.
So I have to let you know that I'm attracted, but at the same time, hold my center.
Got it.
So you have to lose your fear of being alone. You have to understand that in life, we don't get what we want. We get who we are. And that's going to be a hard one to grasp if you don't follow the process that we're talking about here.
Also, before we go to the next panel, there's one last thing I want to say. I left out the psychic. Okay.
Oh.
So during this actually long before I met Steve, 5 long years before I met Steve, I had gone to see a woman in Miami who believed she was a psychic. One of my coworkers turned me on to her, and she told amazing stories. My friend was a lesbian, and she said, oh my gosh, she even knew which pronoun to use, and you've got to talk to this woman. So it was an older woman. I do think maybe she did have a gift. I'm not a big believer in psychics, but based on what happened with us, it was an interesting situation. So I went to her house. I told her all about, what I was looking for. I'm looking for my soulmate. I want a relationship. I mean, where is he? Basically, that was it. Where is he? And she was like, I see something, but it's so far away. And then she lit up and she said, but you want to be a writer. Now, this was long before Clark Atlanta. I was a reporter for the Miami Herald. And I thought, okay, that's not a big stretch. Every reporter wants to write novels or whatever.
Right.
She said, but she was just, her light filled her face. She said, you're going to write a novel. And it's going to be a bestseller. I see it wrapped in a gold bow. And she went on and on and on. She was comparing me to Maya Angelou. Look, I'm just passing it on. I'm just telling you what she said. And by this time, I was almost rolling my eyes. It's like, really, Maya Angelou, you're really pushing it, lady. She said, listen, you become who you're supposed to become. That's when you'll meet your man. Well, doggone it, if not on the basis of my first novel's publication, when I was invited at Clark Atlanta University, did I meet this guy.
So we're going to be revisiting this.
Become the person you're supposed to become.
The expression, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. We're going to apply knowledge and wisdom from other areas into this. In this particular case, is when the lover is ready, the beloved will appear.
Yes.
So it's the first thing that we have to do is to show you what the 5 steps of this process are before we get into specifics. So we'll just go back over here.
Was I too fast with my psychic story?
No,
Okay.
psychic story is fine. Now, this process actually came out of a study of social justice and how people can help to change society. And I've been thinking about this for weeks and weeks and weeks because I'd come across so many people who were wounded, who cared so much about what was happening in our country, and they were being savaged by their own emotions. And so I thought, it is the people who care the most that have the best chance to change the world, but their very caring can destroy them. So what can I do? And so I started dreaming about this, and out of one of those dreams came this sense of how we could get across the river. The original idea was, first, love yourself.
It sounds easy, but that's really where it all begins.
Second, love one other person. Third, understand humanity without guilt, blame, or shame. The fourth thing is to avoid trolls. Don't get into internet arguments with people. Instead of that, nurture your own tribe.
Right.
And the last step was to win with integrity. In other words, to understand that other person is going to win another time. So you want to show them how to win. That character is revealed not just through defeat, but how do you deal with victory?
I want to go back to this number 4, avoid the friend zone, which you substituted trolls for.
Yes, well, I substituted friend zone for trolls for very specific reasons. But go ahead.
Yeah, I don't want to denigrate friendship. Some of you have friendships that have long outlasted your romantic relationships. So we don't use friend zone to mean that friends aren't important.
No, the friend zone.
Special. But if you're someone who wants a sexual mated relationship and that the person who is your friend does not see you as a sexual mate, that is what people call the friend zone.
Now, so here's where it's critical. There is no friend zone. Friend zone is a zone where you want more than the other person does. That's the term that was used. And aching hearts have had that, and men and women. And that term has been co-opted to mean, that person has been leading me on and they don't want sex, but they want stuff. In other words, it's as if it's something negative. No. There is no friend zone. They're just friends.
Right.
They're just people that you know. Remember what we said, that you're never more than 3 steps away from the person who you probably could be with the rest of your life. So if one person does not want to be with you, for God's sake, that person might be able to introduce you to the person that you're looking for.
True.
So we're going to get back to that. We're going to cover one of these every week, and we're going to go into them and discuss them, because it's this exact same process that we were teaching to people for social justice warriors, as it were, that can be applied to the question of how do you prepare yourself to find a partner? And then how do you nurture the partner once you have them?
Okay. When you use social justice warriors, you don't mean it in the traditional sense.
No.
Because that term has become denigrated.
Yeah, I consider it a badge of honor.
Yeah, right.
Some
people
of
who care about the world and want to make it a better place.
People who are willing to fight for an equitable society. It's like, wow, that says nothing about whether they are fighting fairly or unfairly, doing it poorly or well, but to be willing to stand up
Yeah, so those same principles that Steve developed for people who had their hearts open and battered because they were, well, these times, in terms of social justice, have been very hard to deal with.
I realized that they could be applied to everything that I've been teaching about the process of finding a partner.
Finding a
And
soulmate.
if you start with loving yourself, so let's talk about that. Just loving yourself. Now, everybody who is on this should have gotten a copy of one of the tools that we use for loving yourself, which is the ancient child meditation. So that's a place to start. But talk a little bit about loving yourself, please.
Well, nobody likes to hear it, but this is very much where the soulmate process begins. Because had I loved myself more, I would not have been chasing so many emotionally unavailable men who did not treat me well, who were kind of come here, go away, who, you never know if they're going to call or will they not call or won't they call. And those relationships just were not satisfactory to me. And had I had more love for myself, certainly more confidence in myself, I would have known to walk away much sooner. So loving yourself really helps give you the tools to better assess what kinds of relationships you're entering. You can see right away when there's a red flag. In fact, I wrote an entire book, My Soul to Keep, about a woman who is ignoring red flags. Her husband is an immortal. He never gets sick. She's so blinded by, well, he's gorgeous. He's multilingual. He's been, he has all these great attributes, but he's not quite like a regular human being, but she never let herself see it. And she wasn't loving herself enough. So that's just what that is. Love yourself. Open your eyes. See your own worth. And in seeing your own worth, you can better assess the worth of others.
If you don't love yourself, how are you going to be able to accept love from someone else? See, remember Groucho's joke about I would never belong to any club that would have someone like me for a member? If you don't love yourself.
That was pretty much me when I was single.
If you don't believe you're worth love, and someone looks at you with love in their eyes, you have to believe either that they are lying or that they're a fool.
Right.
You can't let it in. You have to be able to let it in. And if you give yourself love, if you start with that, then you're much less likely to get manipulated by someone who knows that you are desperate for love.
Yeah.
That you know how to take care of yourself. You know how to cook your own dinner. Nobody can blow your mind by taking you to a restaurant or cooking you a burger. You know how to cook the meal that you want. Now, maybe you're looking for someone who you can cook with, who loves cooking. You can cook together in the kitchen, but you can eat alone.
Right.
Okay. If you love yourself, if you connect yourself to the source of love within you, and that's a core thing. All people can do is help you to discover the source of love that was already inside you. If it's not inside you, they can't help you. And if it is inside you, then you don't need them. And there is a huge difference between needing someone and wanting someone.
Right.
I don't need Tanana even that way. I mean, I need her at this point in our existence because we have a family. Right. We have but in terms of who it is that I am in life, I don't need this lady. If I needed her, I would try to control her. I want her. Yeah. I desire her. I'm crazy about her. But I know that I'm an autonomous human being without her. And I know that she is an autonomous human being without me. She doesn't need me either. She's here because she wants to be here.
We choose to be here.
We choose to be here. And you make that choice every day. And you make that choice when you say, I do. And you make that choice when you say, I love you. But that gift of love that you're going to give someone else at some point, the first thing you have to do, the most critical thing you have to do is give that gift to yourself. That I remember talking to this one lady who was married to this guy who was borderline personality, issues, and was abusive to her. Yeah. It was abusive to her children. His stepfather, father to her children. And I said to her, did he change after you married him? And she said, no, he was like this before. I said, wait a minute, why did you marry him? And what she said was, he deserved love. And my answer was yes, but he didn't necessarily deserve it from you.
Right.
That where were you in this? Where was what your needs were? And what about your children? Don't you want to find the healthiest, strongest, most loving partner you can possibly find, the healthiest relationship your heart can hold, you have to start with loving yourself.
Yeah, and the second one, love someone else, doesn't mean love someone else as a charity move or love someone else because no one else will love them. Love someone else because they are the partner you want, the partner you crave, the partner that makes you feel good.
Right. So if you don't get this first piece, if you don't love yourself the way you would love your own most beloved child, then telling you to take responsibility for your life, responsibility for your relationship is going to sound very painful. Because if I say you don't get what you want, you get who you are. If you don't love yourself, you could collapse when you hear that. It's like, oh, I'm bad. Guilt, blame, and shame starts coming in. And we want none of that. I want you to feel that your life is a miracle, that your days are stepping stones to a future that will fill your heart with love and purpose and contribution. And that a partner, if someone cannot walk with you on the road to life, you're climbing a mountain together. And if a person is too fast for you, well, if they're too slow for you, well, hope that they find someone who can move at their pace. When you find someone who's moving at the same mountain, on the same trail, at the same pace, now you can hold hands together and move.
It shouldn't feel exhausting. It shouldn't feel like you're slowing yourself down for the other person.
That's right.
It is very much that we are walking in the same direction, on the same mountain, at the same pace. Are we going through all 5 of the principles?
No.
We're just going through the love yourself.
Each week we're going to take one principle and go and drill deep.
So start with love yourself. I mean, nobody likes to hear that thing that you'll find love when you're not looking for it. But let's pretend there's some truth to that for a moment, because there is. What that really means is, first, love yourself. First, feel comfortable with your own company. I know some people don't like to go to movies by themselves and this sort of thing. Maybe start doing that. Find aspects of being with you that you can celebrate in ways that you haven't celebrated before, to get out of that notion that you are somehow incomplete without your soulmate. I know it doesn't seem intuitive when we're here at a Soulmates webinar to say, who cares about your soulmate? But on one level...
Well, it's almost like you're saying you want to cook a dinner. How are you going to start with raw food? I thought we want cooked food. Yeah, but you have to start with raw food to get there. You have to start by generating enough love inside yourself that you have love to give and share. You have to start by having the self-respect to demand what you're actually worth, to admit what you actually want, so you're not feeling like you've settled. I mean, I can promise you one thing. I have never looked at Tanana or even thought, I'm settling. This was, this, right. I do think this is the best I can do. And ain't it great? I think that's like this, and there are times when I think that she's driving me crazy, but then I remember she's the best I can do.
And also remember, you're driving me crazy too. So
Exactly. That's part of what human beings do. I drive myself crazy. I don't keep all my promises to me. I confuse me. Why in the world would I possibly think that another human being is going to be more perfect for me than I am? It's absurd.
So in terms of love yourself, I would say treat yourself to something new, a new experience, a club, that writing group you've always been meaning to find. Something that's not based on the internet, but is actually based in a face-to-face interaction that you're doing, not so you can scope it out. I mean, you will be kind of scoping it out, but really on the surface, it should be because you want to explore this thing and do this thing that you haven't allowed yourself to do.
Now, the ancient child meditation, I talk about, I'll give you 2 pieces here. And on the social media group, we can go as deep into this as you want. We'll answer any questions that you want over on Facebook, the new Soulmate group. But we use heartbeat meditation, which is simply sitting quietly and listening to your heartbeat, feeling. You can take your pulse like this, but you stick with your heartbeat for 10 to 20 minutes. The average for most people, the first 10 to 15 minutes of meditating, is your head will fill with garbage. It's all the stuff coming up, all the thoughts. Oh, this isn't working. I'm itchy. I have to do something else. Those voices are totally natural. After somewhere between 10 to 15 minutes, for most people, it'll start quieting down. And what you want is to just be in touch with that symbol of life within you. So that is one exercise. It is the most powerful, safe meditation, or the safest, powerful meditation I know. And I've been doing it every day for 30 years. So it absolutely works. The other thing that I wanted to offer you is the ancient child meditation. And that was developed after years and years of work. And it is that you create a symbol which represents your own innocence, your own love, whoever it is that you were before the damage of life kicked in. Now, maybe if you had a happy childhood, it could be that you got to being a teenager before you ran into any real pain.
There's always something.
But it could be that you have no memory of ever being loved. The one thing that I want to say to you is that there's this thing called failure to thrive. Human beings who are not loved, cherished, protected, die. They cannot survive. So even if you have no memory of ever having been loved, at some point you were. Now, maybe you were in swaddling clothes. Maybe you were just an infant. But what I want you to do, and what the ancient child meditation asks you to do, is to visualize your own body filled with light, as much light as you can create inside your body in a visualization. Then you condense that light down into a ball. And whatever large that ball is, that represents the size you were when the emotional damage kicked in. Okay. You turn that into a child. Maybe it's no more than a fetus floating in a psychic womb within you. But most people will be able to create a child, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years old, something like that in there. Get quiet enough that child begins to speak to you. And all of a sudden, you have created a connection to your own heart that is phenomenal, and your own creativity and your own energy. You had some thoughts about that loving connection. Writing with your left hand.
Oh, right. Thank you for that prompt. One of the exercises in therapy was to write a note as your inner child with your non-dominant hand. In that case, it would be my left hand. So it looks like a childlike handwriting, where you just say everything you've always wanted to say to someone who has hurt you. The point is not to send the letter. In fact, I did not send mine. Although it did empower me to say some things to my father in real conversation that I wanted him to know, not angry, but just to share. But try writing a note as your inner child where you express that pain, or maybe write a note to yourself as that inner child.
Now, that is what I've suggested to a lot of my clients, that with your non-dominant hand, you write a note from your inner child to you as an adult, right, and see what that child will say. And this is not a theoretical exercise. Don't think your way through this. Do it. Because if you do it, you will find yourself writing things that you did not expect. And once you make that connection between yourself and that loving child self within you that is always there, no matter how old you get, you've touched something close to your survival drive, that instinct to protect children. If you don't have this instinct to protect yourself, because many of us get damaged there, we all have the instinct to protect children. If you can visualize that child and connect to that child, you can actually use that. You can work around the damage, around the negative voices. This connection, that sense of owning yourself, belonging to yourself, is essential to the process. The rest of the process will not work if you don't love yourself. So that's where I want you to start, and to over the next week in your workbook and on the social media platform, we will have questions that are listed there. Over the next week, work on loving yourself, and also work on work.
We have to put it up on the screen.
Yes, work on.
So these questions will be posted. They're not posted now, but they will be posted.
Yes, they're going to be posted.
They're going to be posted.
And we will send them out to you as well.
Some sample questions that you can ask yourself as you begin the process of preparing for your soul. Call it a playbook instead of a workbook, Tom. Do you have role models for strong relationships? These are some questions you might not have thought about before. What do you think it takes to have a healthy relationship? Luck, work. When you think about relationships, do you imagine the pleasure or the pain? Are your circle of friends in healthy relationships or pity parties? That's another whole subject, is pity parties. Do you confide in friends or retreat from them when you are unhappy in a relationship? That was my thing. When things were not going well, I would stop talking to my friends because I knew what they were going to say. Why are you even interested in this guy? And do you want to read the next ones, honey?
Yes. Okay. What do you need to do to forgive and love yourself? Can you make your visualizations of pleasure stronger than your visualizations of pain? Do you commit to this path of loving yourself, finding and nurturing love? Do you really believe you can do this? What new friends, allies, and mentors do you need? What skills or knowledge? You will find these questions, we will make sure that you have these questions. But over the next week, we would like you to start journaling this so you start digging into what your attitudes are.
Right.
So that's
week one.
That's week one.
So thank you all for being here, Alan. I'm glad you feel like you're in the right place. Look for the upcoming materials for the workbook / playbook, and also check out our social media site on Facebook.
We will have, there are replays that are available for you, those of you who are here live, those of you who are getting the finished product down the road. There will be additional resources there for you. And I guess the last thing I wanted to say is how honored I feel to be finally sharing this material with people. I've never gone into this the way that I wanted to. And so this is my first chance to do that.
Well, here we are, letting it all hang out for you all. And look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you. Love yourselves. And we will see you next week.
We will see you next week. Take care.
Bye-bye.